All right. My name is Marshall Conley. I'm a consultant with the Geneseo Public Library. Today is February 26, 2018, and I'm in Woodhull, Illinois, with Illinois State Representative Dan Swanson. So, thank you for sitting down with us today. And as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about your time in the military and your service to our country, and we're going to start with some basic biographical information. So, first, when and where were you born?
Actually, I was born on a farm real close to Woodhull, about 5 miles from where we're at. Of course, born on the farm, but actually I was born at Illinois Public Hospital. Grew up on that farm at about 3 years of age. My parents, we moved to a farm near Lynn Center, where I attended Orion schools from kindergarten through 8th grade. And then we moved to the farm where my mom and dad currently reside, and I attended Alwood High School my freshman through senior year in high school, graduated in May of 1977. While attending Orion schools, I attended kindergarten in Andover, first grade in a country school in Lynn Center, second grade in Andover, third grade in Osco, fourth and fifth grade in Andover, sixth grade at C.R. Hanna, Orion, and then 7th and 8th grade at the middle school. And when I talk to people from the Orion community, I tell them, you prepared me to be in the Army, because the Army was a constantly shifting of positions.
Wow. That's quite a lot of moving around. So you grew up on farms. What kind of farms? What did your parents raise?
Throughout our entire farming, my great-grandfather, we farmed, that my great-grandfather farmed, ground that my great-uncle farmed, and they bought back in the early 1900s. And throughout all of our farming years, we've had crops, corn, hay, later on, of course, beans, and I've always had a stock cow herd and fed out fat cattle, and always pigs on the farm. We used to farrow several hundred sows every year. So, and we still have cows, fat cattle, and hogs on our farm, along with the grain.
Wow. That's great, and it's great history.
Yeah, my dad at 82 still runs a combine, drives a tractor, and he tells us boys he's got 3 simple rules. Rule number 1, he doesn't wash the windows on those big tall combines. That's for us boys to do. Second rule is if he breaks down, that's what he carries a cell phone for. We come fix the equipment. And the third rule is if he has to turn the lights on, he's been out too late that night. So we're okay with that.
Those are great words. Great words. So you have siblings, brothers?
Yes. My brother Steve is one of the primary farmers when I do all my travels and gallivanting across Illinois and the world. My son, Matt, who's with the farming operation too, he graduated from Illinois State University and moved back on the farm, and he now manages one of the hog farms or hog buildings, and also works at a local seed dealer where he's a technology guy. He's married. He got married this past Memorial Day weekend to a sweet gal from Geneseo. She's a school teacher in Kewanee schools, where she teaches pre-K special needs children. And my oldest son, Mark, lives in Cedar Rapids, where he's a district salesman for a large seed corn company. And he got married September 30th to a beautiful young lady. Her name is Abby. And she sells furniture at Art Van Furniture Store in Iowa City. My wife, Tammy, we got married April 30th, 1983. She last October retired from the Henry County Courthouse, so she can devote more time to someday grandchildren and helping me on my campaign and work.
Very good, very good. So among your brother or your parents or grandparents, was anyone else in the military? Did anyone else serve?
I've had great uncles who served in World War II. I've got an uncle who served in Korea. While doing some research on my mom's family, I learned that my great-grandfather served in World War I. My mom's dad served in World War I. And I need to mention my nephew's also part of the farming operation. better mention that.
Very good, very good.
But no, and that's I've always enjoyed hearing the competition between a great uncle who was in the Marines and another great uncle who was in the Army, and the stories they could tell. And then, of course, my uncle who was in the Army serving in Korea has just kind of recently told some stories.
Okay, wow, that's a good bit of service within the family. And so you said you graduated from Allwood High School, and then between then and when did you join the service?
So I graduated from Allwood in May of 1977, and a neighboring farmer who was a commander for the local National Guard unit called me as a neighbor's boy and said, "Hey, come help me bale straw." So that would have been in later July. So I went to help bale straw, and when we got done at the end of the day, he said, "Hey," he said, "why don't you go with me over to my National Guard unit? I want to give you a tour." So there at the latter part of July, and I went over and toured it, and I enlisted August 12th, 1977 in the Illinois Army National Guard as a wheeled vehicle mechanic. I attended basic training in January of 1978, and my advanced individual training of a wheeled vehicle mechanic started in March of 1978. And the day I got on the bus to head to boot camp was a day of Super Bowl Sunday. And I didn't find out who won that Super Bowl until later on in the year. It was interesting, the boot camp, or the AIT I went to was 63 Bravo. It was called Power Generator Wheel Vehicle Mechanic. Since then, they've been split up into Power Generator Mechanics and Wheel Vehicle Mechanics. But it was a self-paced course, designed for 9 weeks. Was a farm boy. I knew what a grease gun was. I knew what a Zerk fitting was. I knew what wrenches were and all those. I was able to complete the course in 4 weeks and home in 5 weeks. And so it was, I understood maintenance and being on the farm, and being self-paced, I was easily able to go through that course quickly. So I came back. I did my traditional guardsman of tending drills 1 weekend a month. And then in March of 1980, in 1980, the Army started a program where they were bringing National Guard soldiers onto active duty, serving in the active duty military. I applied for a job and was selected as a mechanic, an E4 specialist, and was picked up for an active duty tour in March of 1980. And that was in March of 1980, and in April 1980 I bought my first brand new car, a 1980 Ford Mustang.
There you go. Very cool.
And the only option I had to have them put in an AM/FM cassette radio. No air conditioning, it's 4-speed. Yeah. So
cassettes and not
8-track.
It was an 8-track.
No, it was cassette.
It was cassettes.
Cassette,
okay,
yeah.
So it was the new stuff.
Yeah, it was new. Yeah, none of that old 8-track stuff.
Ah, yeah, nice. Nice. So, very interesting. You spend an afternoon, baling straw, and then a month later you're enlisted. What did that neighbor say to you or show you that motivated you to do that?
Well, it's just like that car salesman. You don't close a deal until you get the person to drive the car. And I had considered the Air Force when I was going to school, but I didn't make it in the Air Force. So as an option then, he invited me over to see the National Guard. I liked it. I liked the benefits of the 4-year college tuition. Okay. And, it was an opportunity to work that 1 weekend a month and get a pretty decent paycheck.
Sure.
And whoever thought it'd end with 27 and a half years later with a military career.
Okay. Wow. Great. And so you moved up to active duty in 1980. And what did that entail? Did you have new training, or did you just report somewhere? How
I
did that
just,
work?
on March 1st, 1980, I started reporting to that National Guard unit in Kewanee,
Okay.
working as a wheeled vehicle mechanic. There were only 3 of us in the state of Illinois who were mechanics. Many of those active duty positions converted from National Guard to active duty were in supply, training, administration. But there were 3 of us that were mechanics. After doing that about 3 years, I moved up to be an assistant training NCO. Those AGR or Active Guard Reserve positions were converted then back over to technicians, which the majority of the maintenance people were technicians. So I moved up to be an assistant training NCO, and didn't really require much school because I was at this time I was an E6, a staff sergeant, and understood the requirements of an NCO. I attended my basic NCO school, attended an advanced NCO school, and about the time I was going to be promoted to Sergeant First Class, I decided to go to Officer Candidate School. Officer Candidate School started in July of 1985 with the Illinois Military Academy. That included doing a 2-week summer training at Marseilles training area up near Marseilles, Illinois. Walking out in the timbers of Marseilles, living up there for 2 weeks with no showers and getting stinky, but everybody stunk the same. And eating meals out of a tin can and that. And then attended several drill weekends in Springfield, and I was finally commissioned as second lieutenant in June of 1986. And because of that, as I was on active duty as an enlisted soldier, I lost my full-time job. I went back into farming because there was not a position for a lieutenant on active duty with that unit.
Okay.
So I was back on the farm. I attended my officer basic course from October 1987 to March of 1988. And in April 1988, the Guard unit I was in transitioned from a company to battalion headquarters, and I applied for the second lieutenant position in that headquarters and was picked up again as an active duty officer in that battalion headquarters in Kewanee.
Okay.
My officer basic course was ordnance, so I had to become reclassified. It was an air defense artillery battalion headquarters. I was a training officer there. I was a battery commander. When I was a battery commander, I was a battery commander at the Galesburg Guard unit.
Okay.
And attained the rank of major after going to many schools. A lot of training exercises, a Graf and Veer. Went on Bright Star in Egypt in Bright Star 89, I believe, 88, Bright Star 88. Went to Egypt for a couple weeks as part of a major exercise of all the branches of the service and that in the desert. Attained the rank of major when I was a battalion executive officer, and so I could be promoted to lieutenant colonel. I was transferred to a field artillery battalion in Milan, Illinois in 1998, where I commanded the field artillery battalion from July 1999 to January 2001, and retired in January 2001 with 20 years active duty and 3.5 years National Guard. But the story doesn't end there. While I was, within the military, required some civilian education.
Right.
I received my associate's degree from Blackhawk East Community College and my bachelor's degree from Western Illinois University through the Board of Governors program as a non-traditional student.
Okay.
I attended classes at night, attended weekend classes, did a lot of correspondence work, computer courses or courses over the computer. And within a spring and a summer semester, I attempted 39 hours and completed like 34, 35 hours to get my bachelor's degree.
Great.
Wow.
And it was a lot of studying. But once I retired, I did some. I went from August 2002 to November 2002. I worked for a contract company training TSA. It's when we converted TSA people to our airports. I was at St. Paul, Minnesota, where I was a logistics computer guy, as they trained hundreds of TSA agents through that embassy suites in St. Paul.
Wow.
And after that, I did some government contract work for the Rock Island Arsenal, working for several different contract companies. Of course, we all know what happened September 11th, 2001. And there I was sitting on the sidelines, watched a lot of soldiers I trained go to war, so I volunteered out of retirement, put the uniform back on July 1st, 2007, and spent a year in Baghdad, Iraq until July 2008.
Wow.
My job in Iraq, first off, I had to go through 2 weeks of training at Fort Benning, Georgia, where they could teach me to respell Army. Having been out for over 6 years, weapons didn't change, but first aid, communications equipment, survival stuff, it all changed in those years. So I was taught through regreening how to spell Army. And then after that 2 weeks, I spent a week at CRC, which is a combat readiness center, where it prepared us to go to combat environment. Spent a week there, and during that week there, I ran into someone who I had attended school with at Fort Bliss, Texas, back in 1990. So 17 years later, ran into an old friend, an old classmate. Pretty cool. But I went to Iraq, arrived into Kuwait about the last week of July, and of course spent about 4 or 5 days in Kuwait, learning, getting acclimated in that. And then we took a C-130 from Kuwait and flew into Baghdad. Arrived in Baghdad at ODARC 30, got a hooch near Baghdad International Airport, BIOP, where we had to get logged into country and go through some formal stuff. And then we took an armored vehicle from BIOP into Baghdad, into the green zone.
Okay.
Of course, got in there at ODARC 30 in the morning, got all these bags of gear and all this luggage, and they put us up in a hooch. It was dark. Slept, got up early the next morning, noticed the hooch next to us was destroyed. We said, "What's up with that?" "Yeah, I got hit by a mortar round the night before you guys got here."
Jeez.
So, sure glad we were delayed one day somewhere on that adventure.
Wow.
But my job there, I was in the green zone. My official title was Deputy Director of Iraqi Force Generation. Worked with some great Americans, great Australian officers and leaders, Danish officers, Air Force, Marine, Navy, of course Iraqi officers, and just a lot of the multinational British multinational forces. But as a Deputy Director of Iraqi Force Generation, my job was to synchronize with the coalition forces and the Iraqi forces, based upon the Prime Minister's need for forces in the battle zone. I would synchronize times where soldiers could go to their basic training and advanced military training to learn their job skills. Once we identified open windows at the different training bases throughout Iraq, we knew where we were going to put in the battle space. When that space came available to go through school, then I would organize when we should start recruiting to fill these classes at this particular Iraqi military installation. And while all this was going on, I was also coordinating with multinational forces and other units or other organizations within Iraq, within our area, where the equipment would come for to fill that unit with pickup trucks, rifles, commo gear, mine detector equipment, uniforms, all that stuff a soldier needs to do their job. And then we'd set them up in a unit set fielding at a location in Iraq where the NCOs who'd never met their soldiers before, and the officers who'd never met the NCOs, we brought them to one central location where they got all the gear they needed. And while all this was going on, the training, the recruiting, and all that, we were also looking at places to put them in the battlefield. So if this unit was going to Basra, or this organization coming out of fourth generation was going to Mosul, what facilities are available to build them in, or do we need to build something quickly to put them in that battle space? Because as they got in the battle space and started to be combat contributors, then we could bring American forces home once they started occupying that battle space.
Right.
So a lot of work went into it. A lot of Army briefings every week. We had to, analyze to the details of where we're at and when they're going to be coming out of fourth generation, because that attributed to when units could come home too.
Sure.
And it was, not a day goes by you don't think of something that happened. Some experience. Lost 3 good friends in incidences over there, and made some great friends that I still try and connect with yet today. And it's just incredible what one of the neatest things I had the opportunity to do. We were sitting every morning. I went to the battle update assessments. General Petraeus was the commander. I worked for General Swan, a great American who did a year's tour, went home 2 weeks, and came back to do another tour. I mean, he's just a great American. I was in the Pentagon. I ran into him one day, and he was a civilian then, of course, but great American. Colonel Docknall, the meanest redhead I'd ever seen in the Army. I mean, he just was a terror. It was awesome. But we were sitting in that battle update assessment, and the Iraqi government had just agreed to start giving the Kurdish government money for the oil it's been taking for years. And if you remember, Kurdistan was that no-fly zone that
Right.
they loved Americans. And so General Petraeus piped up. I worked for General Swan. General Swan worked for General Dubik. General Petraeus, of course, a 4-star. General Dubik was a 3-star, General Swan a 4-star. So with that agreement to give them oil, the Kurds then had to provide military forces to the Iraqi army, because the Iraqi people feared the Kurds. I mean, Peshmerga means warrior, and they were truly warriors. They carried a big stick. The president surrounded himself with the Kurdish brigade. So General Petraeus said, "Hey Jim," he says, "you saw where the Iraqi army's trying to get the Kurds. They've got a team going up to Kurdistan. Who you sending up there?" Jim Dubik turned to Robin Swan and said, "Robin, who you sending up to mediate talks between the Kurds and the Iraqi army?" General Swan turned to me and said, "Swanson, put a team together. You're going to go up there and mediate talks between the Peshmerga army and the Iraqi army."
Wow.
So I got a team together of other like-minded fourth generation guys, equipping guys, training guys, and then of course a security detachment of 2 with long guns, and the 6 of us, off we went. Took a C-130 from Baghdad. I mean, it was hard to get anywhere over there. I mean, you just didn't drive from point A to point B. So we got transportation out to Baghdad, where we caught a C-130, flew to Mosul. From Mosul, took a helicopter over to a Japanese camp in Erbil, and spent a night in Erbil. And then that next morning, 4 Toyota Pathfinders pulled up to our front gate, and we jumped in with representatives from the Iraqi Army, representatives from the Peshmerga Army, and representatives of my team, Coalition Forces. And we spent about 8 days driving around Kurdistan to all the different Army installations, looking at how they trained Peshmerga soldiers compared to how they trained Iraqi soldiers. And if they were going to join forces, what schools would need to be kept open, what training needed to be completed, what type of academies did they have there that maybe the Iraqi Army could use too for their training. Yeah. And went to Sulaymaniyah. We driving from Erbil to Sulaymaniyah, and in front of our car up pops a Holstein cow. We're in this larger city. And I asked my interpreter, I said, "Who's that cow belong to?" He looked at me real puzzled, and he said, "Well, it belongs to the city." So what do you mean it belongs to the city? He says, "Yeah, you need milk, you milk the cow." Just like that's how we do in America. You stupid, that's what we do here. But drove by a John Deere dealership, saw some John Deere equipment, combine, tractors, drove by some of the largest wheat fields I'd ever seen, and a great big grain elevator similar to what you'd see out in Kansas. But went to Sulaymaniyah, beautiful town. You thought you were in a college town anywhere in the Midwest. Just a beautiful town, great people. We went to a park, walked around the park, and there were people dancing and singing and buying ice cream and hot dogs, or not hot dogs, but buying ice cream and stuff and snow cones. And when I went back to my room, I learned that park is where Saddam Hussein had killed hundreds of people from Kurdistan. They did a mass burial there. And they thought the best way to pay tribute to all those people was to build a park around that mass grave. So they had a way to pay tribute to them through their fun and remembrance of them through a park.
Wow.
And yeah, it was pretty
Powerful.
Touching. Yeah. But spent about, like I said, a week, 8 days up there, and then flew back to in a roundabout way. It's an interesting story too. We ended up flying on a Sherpa. If you know what a Sherpa is, it's the only fixed-wing aircraft the Army flies.
Right.
We went to the Erbil airport and supposed to grab this plane, and eventually in the darkness, a plane landed with no lights or anything, hit the landing. We went up there with our trucks, got in that Sherpa. I mean, these soldiers, that's their home on wheels, and all their luggage and stuff is strewn everywhere. And we found a seat on that Sherpa, and off we went to Balad. As I was getting my soldiers manifested on a flight to Balad, was the day, and they had a big screen TV in there. And if you remember the Kentucky Derby back in 2008, a horse broke its leg.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
And as I was manifesting my crew to fly to Baghdad via helicopter at dark 30 next morning, they were euthanizing that horse on the track at the Kentucky Derby. Just kind of amazing some of the things that happened at the, we got a couple hours of sleep that night, but went back to Baghdad. That would have been April. I was there for a few more weeks, and I left Iraq around June 14th. Went back to Qatar, spent a week there just to demobilize, and then got to back to Fort Benning, Georgia, and demobbed there and got home latter part of June, and was once again separated in July of 2008, put back into retirement. Once again spent time at the Rock Island Arsenal as a contractor, and then in April 2010 the Army called and invited me to come back to the Rock Island Arsenal, where I showed up, and an 06 colonel said, "What are you doing here?" So, well, I've been put on duty. He says, "Well, here's what you're going to do." He said, "I was looking for somebody to lead a project of military and civilian members transferring a mission from the Pentagon to the Rock Island Arsenal." So I spent 3 years leading a team of civilians and military members in a mission of lead material integrators, where there were 100 and some people doing the mission at the Pentagon, we were able to transfer to the Rock Island Arsenal in about 2.5 years. And with that mission transfer, we also developed an automation tool within the computer networks. What was done with the stubby pencil and spreadsheets in the Pentagon, we were now able to do with this automation tool. And what it does, if a supply sergeant or a logistician needs equipment, and they see a unit has it, and I'm a higher priority than that other unit, I can request that equipment and take it away from them based upon my requirements. If I'm in Korea and I need this equipment, and you're somewhere stateside and you have a lower priority, I can take that equipment to make my unit more ready for war. And it revolutionized the way we equip the Army today at a pretty significant cost savings with that. And was put back into retirement in April 2013. And in September 2013, I was hired as superintendent for the Henry County Veterans Assistance Commission, where I served with basically two primary missions. One, to coordinate transportation for Henry County veterans to Iowa City VA Hospital for their medical care, care they most likely would not have had if we didn't have this transportation asset. I had about 16 volunteer drivers who I would call them up and say, hey, can you make a trip to Iowa City next week? I've got 3 veterans from Henry County that need to go. Yep. What time do I need to pick them up? They pick them up at 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning, take them to Iowa City, bring them back home 2:30, 3 o'clock that afternoon.
Wow.
And I also had financial dollars to provide, to buy groceries, to pay rent, and also to help pay utility bills, electric, water, things like that. And then also help veterans with any advocacy issues they might have. I resigned from that. I started in September 2013, resigned from that in June of 2015, so I could campaign for my current office as state representative. Currently moving into the second year of my service in the office, I've got a couple veterans bills.
Great.
One of them that I'm very excited about, I actually have a committee hearing this upcoming Thursday, it's called the Silver Alert Bill. We've all heard of the Amber Alert, where if children are reported missing, we immediately begin looking for them. Well, currently there's a Silver Alert Bill where if an elderly person is reported missing and they've had signs of dementia or maybe walked away from a nursing home, we immediately begin looking for them. Mm-hmm. My bill would add legislation that if a veteran who's at high risk, we won't wait to 24 hours, we'd begin immediately looking for them, because with 20 veterans committing suicide a day, we need to begin looking now and not waiting for that full day. Mm-hmm. So that's a Silver Alert bill that'll be coming up here in next week. It's already passed the Senate, and I'm trying to get it through the House. Okay. Another veterans piece of legislation, maybe not veterans legislation, but it's some kind of cool legislation, is if a senior in high school has completed their basic training between their junior and senior year of high school, that when they have graduation, they can wear their uniform, their Class A uniform, or their dress uniform at the high school graduation. So, I thought that was already allowed, but evidently it's not. So, kind of looking forward to that.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That's a good set of bills.
Mm-hmm. And got some other legislation to help with some licensing issues, but these are the fun ones here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to be able to pour into what you care about through your current role, and
And it's, I'm one of, there's basically, I think I'm the only one who's been at OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom, or Operation Enduring Freedom. I know Rep. Costello served with the 82nd during Operation Desert Storm and Shield.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Chaplavia had some time in the military. Current candidate running for governor, Jeannie Ives, was West Point graduate, but I think I'm the longest serving veteran, and also the only farmer who has both hogs and cattle. Another rep has hogs, another rep has cattle, but I've got them both.
You don't see a lot of livestock these
No,
days.
no.
Nice. Very cool.
So what'd I miss?
That
Not much.
Very thorough. So, you've not been out that long. So you know, do you keep how do you keep in touch? You know, well, obviously you devote to veterans causes. You've worked in a capacity working with veterans for the last 5 years. It's part of what you do as a legislator. You know, do you yourself participate in kind of veterans groups or connect with other vets in the area? And if so, how do you do that?
I'm a member of the Andover American Legion.
Okay.
We have a Memorial Day service, and Veterans Day soup supper has been the past history. I'm a member of the Orion VFW, Veterans of Foreign War, and try to be active as much as I can there, supporting different events that they have. I'm a member of the Galesburg, gosh, I'm going to mess this up. I can't think of the name of the organization. They're going to shoot me. But a Galesburg organization, maybe we can take that out. But maintain membership in AUSA, MOAA, I mean all these alphabet organizations. Right. And in the past I've attended events at the Rock Island Arsenal with uniform members, and now as a state rep get invited there to be a part of some of their leadership discussions, and some of those leaders there now are those who I worked with when I was there from 2010 to 2013. General Gamble, a great American I served with. He's a 2-star now. He's a 1-star then. So yeah, it's pretty cool to be able to continue. Try to get to military functions. You know, of course, Memorial Day services at different cemeteries, and also this past Veterans Day I spoke at 3 different schools and 1 major event in Aledo. So it's fun to keep in touch with the kids too. I'm also a substitute school teacher, so enjoy getting into classroom. My longest day substitute teaching was kindergarten class on the 100th day of school. We counted 100 at least 100 times.
Oh man, sure. Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. So
I served on Board of Education for 17 and a half years and 2 years on a county board, and had to resign from the Board of Education here at Alwood because I got elected to a county board. Served 2 years on a county board and had to resign from that because I got called up for military service. And on active duty, you cannot serve on a partisan board, as I was reminded by a senior person.
So, I mean, I have a question here that says, you know, what's the biggest impact military service has had on your life? But it's obviously it's huge. Like your whole life is about service. And so.
To me and my family.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, my wife has been by me the whole time.
Yeah.
Granted, I enlisted in 1977. I met her in December of 1980. But just a short time we weren't together in the military.
Yeah. And so, what do you think within this, you know, this career and this life of both serving in the military and serving the community and now serving the state of Illinois, why has that idea of kind of service resonated with you so strongly?
You know, there's no greater communities than where we are here in Western Illinois. There's no greater state than Illinois, in my opinion. We've got our financial difficulties, but still, it's a great place to live and to grow a family. And what other country is greater than the U.S.? Having been to Korea, having been to Egypt, having been to Iraq and Kuwait and Qatar and these different countries, there's no place like home. The freedoms we have, and we can get disgusted with the politics, but that disgust could be in an open conversation, without any fear of retribution by some leader somewhere. Sure, if we threaten someone, there's going to potentially be retribution, but by golly, there should be. But it's difficult when we have elections where just a handful of people go to those elections. Where in other countries they went through sniper fire, IEDs, and to get to the polling place because they believed in it.
Mm-hmm.
But the past couple weekends I've been honored to attend Eagle Scout ceremonies,
Mm-hmm.
and I always begin that discussion with how much we have in common. I wore a uniform 27 and a half years and put the flag on my shoulder, just like you Boy Scouts have the opportunity to put the black flag on your shoulder every day. You should be proud of that opportunity to represent your country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fantastic. So, knowing how we talked about where these videos and this material is going to be archived, if you could envision, 20, 30, 50 years from now, one message that you'd like to deliver to those, people, those kids maybe in school that are accessing these archives, what would be one message you'd want for those people to have?
Well, a message I would leave is that at this point in time, several men and women have been willing to give their life in defense of this country and this Constitution. And that's still true today. Here we are in 2017. The first battles were back in the early 1700s. We've had world wars, we've had political wars, we've had conflicts and all whatever you call them, but there's always been a life of someone willing to die for them to sit in that classroom, or for someone to, as we talked earlier, to go vote. But that's what's great about this country, that someone's willing to lay their life on the line, and I've had several friends do it. I've had several friends be willing to do it, and as we talked earlier, several family members that were willing to put their lives on the line so that we could have what we have today. Don't take anything for granted. Freedom is a day-to-day opportunity that can be taken at any time. And another point, when I talk at Memorial Day events or I talk at Veterans Day events, I always like to recognize the young people there, because they're the ones who are going to carry on the traditions of Memorial Day services and Veteran Day services. Don't forget those who paid the ultimate sacrifice and those who were willing to pay that ultimate sacrifice.
Fantastic. Are we good time-wise?
We're good.
All right. Well, that was great. Any other closing thoughts, or?
I just appreciate the opportunity to do this. I hope we're able to capture a lot of stories.
Yeah.
My story is nothing compared to some of those, the next generation, the World War II, the Korean War, who were losing every day, those veterans to tell our stories, Vietnam stories. That's when as a veteran advocate, I remind people each time I left the service, in January 01, July 08, December 2013, I had to go through training to learn how to be a civilian. I had to go through specialized training. When you think of that World War II veteran, when he came home, he got off the train and went back to the farms.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't taught how to be a civilian, but he made good of it. The Korean War veteran, when he came home, he or she, any case, got off the train, went back to the factories, because that's what you did. And when you think of the Vietnam veteran, when he or she came home, they got off the train, put on civilian clothes, so they blended in with society. None of those generations were taught, and that's why we're having troubles today with our medical care. Because I had when I was superintendent for Henry County Veterans Assistance, I had a Korean War veteran come in my office needing financial assistance. Had 2 Purple Hearts, bayonet wounds to his belly, and did not realize he was eligible for health care.
Wow.
Immediately, I picked up the phone, printed out some papers, had him sign them. I faxed them, and within 30 minutes, I had him enrolled in health care because he didn't know.
Yeah.
And that's wrong. I mean, that's why I'm trying to do as much as I can to help our veterans and get the word out, because they are truly deserving of. And I tell them, this isn't something free. This is something you earned.
Mm.
You know, you were willing to go to Korea, or you were willing to go to Vietnam. This is a way of your country saying thank you for your service.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you very much. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
This
was all mine.
Yeah. No, we really appreciate it. Amazing all the work you're doing and have been doing. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, had great family behind me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, parents, grandparents, mother, father-in-law. I mean, it takes, you know, I can't do chores every day. It takes a family to do those chores.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a great assistant here, Julie Dilly, who does help in the office. April, Marchand. I mean, it just, you know, you surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, but and the military. I mean, it's just, you know, like I said, it doesn't a day go by that you don't think of some silly story or memory of something that happened, or some sad moments when you remember what happened.
Sure.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
All right.